Think about that. I mean, it is really the greatest advertising campaign in the history of any product. I mean, and this is where people, you have to get into motive. I was just having an interview with another reporter, and I said, our job as reporters is to understand motive. We're like lawyers, right? You
Yeah.
can't tell a story. Why? Why would they be forcing products that don't work on people and all of this? But look at what the pharmaceutical industry did, and so you have a product. Let's look at COVID. Let's say that was a cure for COVID. So now we know the death rate of COVID was like 0.3%, right? So to
Mhm.
save 0.3%, you have a drug that they could take that makes sure that they survive COVID. Would you rather be a company that makes a product that 0.3% of the population takes? Or how about this other category, vaccines? Where the only way this works, actually, that immune suppressed person is really at risk. They're probably too sick to take it. Everybody else has to take it to protect the 0.3%. I mean, it's genius. I got to hand it to
it
them.
is.
That is absolute genius. And even better, if the first shot doesn't work or the second and then the fifth, you know how much money they're making off of this idea that we're all taking something to protect the ones that are really at risk? I
Right.
mean, it's genius. It's crazy. And it doesn't make any sense when you think about it, but it's worked. The CDC is now recommending, I think it's the 9th shot for elderly people. Can you believe it? But the shot, the one and done, or 2 and 3. Well, how about 5? It's like Count Dracula. 6 vaccines will do the job. But now we're at 9. And when you look at the stats, I think under 10% of those that got the vaccine are even getting the boosters, which means now even the believers don't believe the CDC recommendation. That is really horrible. It's horrible that our regulatory agencies are now that untrusted by those that believed in them. Forget about the 30% of America that never got the vaccine under the greatest propaganda push. I think Biden said he put $10 billion behind promoting that vaccine. Our own government promoting an untested, rushed product, and then saying we couldn't get a job without it. People, military people, and I've supported, our nonprofit has supported some lawsuits and won to keep many military in our armed forces because they didn't want to get the vaccine, but many lost their jobs across this country and stood defiantly. I mean, some of the bravest people we can imagine that now we know were right not to take it, lost their jobs because of government mandate without due process, no ability to go to court, say my job matters, I got to feed my family. It didn't matter. We were shut down our nation with social distancing to keep us from getting too close to each other, only to find out a few weeks ago that Tony Fauci, the head of this, saying, yeah, that kind of just popped up. It had no basis in science. The same man that said when we were questioning and challenging him, we were just simply questioning science. I mean, this whole thing's crashing down, right? Everyone that has been aware, that's awake enough, says, wait a minute, you mean that whole thing was a lie? And yeah, and now they're admitting it. I mean, I feel like Tony Fauci should be in jail. I think he should be indicted. And we haven't even gotten into the cover up of what we now know to be the lab leak and Tony Fauci's direct involvement with that, writing fake papers and forcing scientists that told him in emails we now know said, it looks like this came from the lab, Tony. There's no other way to explain this insert of this barren cleavage site, which just advanced the coronavirus like 1,000 years in evolution. This man-made virus has now capabilities that it may have never had on its own. And now it does because a government official like Tony Fauci and others funded gain-of-function research, and 3 people got sick in a lab, walked out, and for those millions that did die, you really only have one person to blame, Tony Fauci. And he did what you would expect someone that made something like that to do. He hid it and he lied to the world. Wrote a paper with scientists saying absolutely natural origin, you're crazy, or conspiracy theory if you point to the lab. How are these people not in jail? And how is it New York Times and Washington Post and CNN are not apologizing and demanding to give them another chance to listen to them when they propagandize one of the greatest lies ever told? I got to calm down. I know I'm being too intense. But
No,
it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking that we're living in this time and that we're going to the Supreme Court to say, not only should we not have been censored, Our government censored everyone that was telling the truth.
Right. Do you think that there's any hope going forward with this? You know, one of the things that's felt hopeless to me is that there have been many lawsuits, and some of the lawsuits have been won in favor of those who've, you know, deserved to win, but they're not winning on the merit I want them to win on. You know, they're not winning because the government shouldn't meddle in our medical decisions. They're not winning, you know, on the actual merit of they're winning on like technicalities. Like, oh, well, you didn't push mandates on everybody, so therefore, you know, it was like arbitrary and capricious. So it makes me feel like the government is learning rather than being schooled and being admonished. They're learning the workarounds because of a lot of these lawsuits. Like, well, next time we'll make sure that we don't do it this way, we do it this way. You know, so it just makes me wonder if there's any hope going forward for the disease X pandemic that they claim is going to be coming for us.
Well, I can tell you, if anyone watches my show, there's a lot more to be afraid of than what you're talking about. I will say that we should have hope. Our court systems have actually done a very good job of ruling many of these things to be unconstitutional, which is about as strong a statement as you can make. You're not allowed. It was unconstitutional to force us to wear masks on airplanes. It was unconstitutional to force employers with 100 employees or more to vaccinate their employees. The only mandate that I know actually held up was the healthcare workers, and that's just on a very fine line. I think we have set precedents. I do think it'll be harder to pull off, this type of forced human experiment ever again. And I also think that what was a 30% resistance to this vaccine will now be a probably very vocal 50% resistance, because they're going to try to do this again. The pharmaceutical industry is the biggest lobby in Washington. It's the biggest lobby in the world. We just handed really the control of our, this controlling, dominating corporate power that has really got its hooks into our government. We just handed them $100 billion. I don't know if you've watched, but the advertising in the news used to be somewhere between 50 and 70% pharmaceutical, huge. Well, now it's like everything looks like a pharma ad. I'm on Spotify and it's all pharma ads. They have so much money to try and brainwash us in this idea that we can't live without them. But, I do think there's hope, but the hope has got to be in the guy that I'm supporting for president of the United States, because Donald Trump, for what anybody ever thought was going to clean up the swamp, he's the one that put Tony Fauci in charge. And then you have Joe Biden, the other guy in this race, who continued the mandates. Both these guys, by the way, both of these presidents locked our country down. Probably most shocking that it was Donald Trump, since he was the one saying he would run the country like a business and did so for a couple of years. But then when the going gets rough, you hand the keys to our nation to a doctor, say, "Oh, do whatever you want with my company. Go ahead and shut the doors and destroy my economy." It's not running it like a business. And then Joe Biden continues that and then forces this vaccine on everybody, which I guess is the only little hairline fracture difference between these two. Donald Trump says, "Well, I would have never forced it on you. I told everyone to get it. I rushed it on the market without any safety testing." But it's really Biden is the bad guy for forcing it on you. Well, however you look at it, there's a guy in third place in this race and gaining on everybody that did what I did the whole time and said, "I'm looking at the science. I'm telling you, it's not going to stop transmission. It's against the law to be forcing it on you, and you should not be locking down our businesses and our schools." So who do we want? The guys that destroyed our country, our economy, our schools, our children, our lives? Because we've had both of those guys. We know where that is. There's the first time is it in history that we have two incumbent presidents running against each other? Or we have someone that had it right the whole time and took all the censorship, took all the attacks, stood his ground, never shifted, and is now, polling at 24 to 26% in battleground states, within reach now of the presidency of the United States. We do have hope. We do have an opportunity right now. But we are all going to have to override the programming from the news telling us he can never win. He's just a spoiler. He's just going to put Donald Trump. I mean, look what they're doing. MSNBC is telling you he's going to vote for Bob is a vote for Donald Trump. Fox is telling you a vote for Bob is a vote for Biden. Well, how about it's both? Bobby Kennedy is going to spoil it for both these guys. I feel very good about it.